For most people, a hotel is temporary. You arrive, check in, sleep for a few nights, and eventually leave. The room does not belong to you. The building is not your home, and the experience is expected to end the moment the trip is over. But at the highest levels of luxury, a hotel can become something very different. It can become a carefully designed world where almost everything has one purpose: to make the guest forget how much work is required to make extraordinary comfort feel effortless. Walk through the entrance of an exceptional luxury hotel, and the transformation begins immediately. The outside world starts to disappear. Traffic, noise, schedules, and ordinary routines are replaced by space, light, polished surfaces, and an atmosphere designed to slow everything down. A staircase is no longer simply a way to reach another floor. It becomes architecture. A lobby is no longer somewhere to wait. It becomes a statement. A swimming pool is no longer simply somewhere to swim. It becomes part of the view. And the room waiting upstairs is no longer simply somewhere to sleep. It becomes a private environment inside a much larger world. This is the first secret of extreme luxury. Almost nothing is allowed to feel ordinary. Consider the living room. In an ordinary hotel, space is valuable, and every square meter must work efficiently. But inside a luxury suite, empty space can itself become part of the experience. Sofas do not have to sit against every wall. Furniture can be arranged around a view. Large windows can bring the outside world directly into the room. Lighting can change the atmosphere after sunset. Materials can be selected not simply because they are durable, but because of how they look, feel, and reflect light. Suddenly, the room is doing more than providing accommodation. It is creating emotion. Move into the bedroom, and the same philosophy continues. The bed is important, but it is only one part of the environment. The surrounding space, lighting, furniture, and view all contribute to the experience. The goal is not simply to provide 8 hours of sleep. The goal is to create a place where the guest wants to remain even when there is an entire city waiting outside. And that tells us something important about luxury. At the highest level, the competition is no longer simply about providing what people need. It is about making them feel that leaving is unnecessary. Then there is the bathroom. Perhaps nowhere is the transformation of an ordinary function into luxury more obvious. Everyone needs a bathroom. The fundamental purpose does not change whether the room is inexpensive or extraordinary, but the experience can change completely. Stone surfaces, glass, carefully positioned lighting, large mirrors, spacious showers, and freestanding bathtubs can transform a routine part of the day into something resembling a private spa. The function remains the same. The environment around that function becomes radically different, and this pattern repeats everywhere. A staircase becomes sculpture. A swimming pool becomes a visual centerpiece. A bedroom becomes a retreat. A living room becomes a private lounge. The hotel itself begins to resemble a temporary mansion, except there is one major difference. An entire invisible organization exists to maintain the experience for you. You do not need to maintain the pool. You do not need to prepare the room. You do not need to manage the building. You arrive, and everything is already waiting. That may be one of the most important differences between owning luxury and experiencing luxury. A mansion can provide extraordinary privacy and space, but ownership also brings responsibility. Systems need maintenance, interiors require care, pools require attention, buildings age, things break. The owner may employ people to handle those problems, but the infrastructure still belongs to them. A luxury hotel offers another proposition. For a limited period of time, you can enter an environment where much of that complexity has already been absorbed by someone else. You experience the result without needing to own the machine behind it. And for wealthy travelers, this can be extremely valuable. Imagine the journey that happens before arrival. A private aircraft crosses a long distance. A helicopter handles another part of the journey. A luxury car completes the final stretch on the ground. After hours of movement, the guest enters the hotel and the entire objective changes. Travel was about getting somewhere. The hotel is about making the destination feel effortless. The luggage disappears toward the room. The noise of transportation is replaced by quiet interiors. The outside heat or cold gives way to a controlled environment. And within minutes, the journey can feel as though it has ended completely. This is why the most extraordinary hotels are not simply competing with other hotels. In some ways, they are competing with private residences, luxury villas, and even yachts. The question is not merely, can we provide a beautiful room? The question is, Can we create an environment so complete that someone accustomed to extraordinary living still feels impressed? That is a much more difficult challenge. Because the wealthier the guest becomes, the harder it is to surprise them with expensive materials alone. Marble is not enough. A large television is not enough. A beautiful bathroom is not enough. A swimming pool is not enough. The experience has to come from the way all of those elements work together. Space, privacy, design, light, service, view, silence, convenience. Every detail contributes to an atmosphere that feels simple only because enormous complexity has been hidden behind it. And this is where luxury hotels become fascinating. The most important part of the experience may not be what the guest sees. It may be what they never have to see. The preparation before they arrive, the cleaning after they leave, the systems keeping every room comfortable, the people maintaining the interiors, the organization required to make a large property feel calm. Luxury is often presented through marble, glass, pools, and spectacular bedrooms. But behind those images is an invisible machine whose purpose is to make everything appear effortless. And once you understand that, the question changes. Instead of asking why someone would pay so much for a place they will leave after only a few nights, perhaps we should ask something else. What exactly are they paying for? A bigger bed? A more beautiful bathroom? A better swimming pool? Or are they purchasing something much harder to photograph the temporary feeling that almost every inconvenience has already been removed before it can reach them? To answer that, we need to go upstairs and close the door behind us. Because inside the most extraordinary suites, a hotel room stops feeling like a room at all. It begins to feel like a private world. Close the door behind you, and something interesting happens. The hotel itself begins to disappear. The lobby, the corridors, the elevators, and the people outside are suddenly separated from you by a single door. What remains is a private environment designed for one purpose: to make temporary space feel personal. And at the highest levels of luxury, that transformation can be extraordinary. A hotel room is normally defined by efficiency: a bed, a bathroom, somewhere to store luggage, perhaps a desk and a chair. Everything necessary for a short stay is compressed into a limited space. But a luxury suite begins with a completely different idea. Instead of asking how little space a guest needs, the design asks how much of the outside world can be brought inside. A bedroom becomes only one part of the experience. Beyond it can be a living room, a dining area, a large bathroom, spaces for relaxation, and windows that turn the surrounding landscape into part of the interior. Suddenly, you are no longer staying in a room. You are moving through a sequence of private spaces. Start with the living area. This is where the difference between accommodation and lifestyle becomes immediately visible. A sofa is not simply somewhere to sit while waiting to leave. The room is designed so that staying inside becomes an option in itself. Furniture can face large windows instead of a television. Tables, lighting, and decorative surfaces create the atmosphere of a private residence. Empty space is allowed to exist because efficiency is no longer the only priority. In ordinary environments, unused space can feel wasteful. In luxury environments, space itself communicates value. The ability to walk across a room without navigating around furniture, to sit away from the walls, or to have different areas for different activities changes the way the environment feels. And then there is the view. One of the most powerful luxury features may be something the hotel did not manufacture at all: a skyline, the sea, a horizon, light moving across the landscape outside. Architecture can frame that view, but it cannot manufacture the location itself. This is why large windows appear so frequently in luxury interiors. Glass turns the world outside into part of the room. During the day, natural light changes the character of the interior. At night, the view becomes another form of decoration. The same room can feel completely different without moving a single piece of furniture. Move into the bedroom, and the environment becomes more intimate. Here, luxury is often less about visual spectacle and more about removing disturbance. Lighting becomes softer. Materials become warmer. The arrangement becomes simpler. The objective is not necessarily to impress the guest every second. It is to create a place where the outside world feels distant. And this is where privacy begins to become more valuable than decoration. A beautiful room can attract attention for a few minutes. A quiet room can change the experience of an entire night. For someone who spends much of life traveling, working, or moving through crowded environments, silence itself can become a luxury. The bed sits at the center of this private world, but even here, the real product is not the object. A bed can be purchased almost anywhere. What matters is everything surrounding it. The temperature of the room, the light entering through the windows, the distance from noise, the feeling of space around the furniture. The ability to wake up and see an extraordinary environment before even leaving the room. Luxury emerges from the combination, rather than any single element. Then comes the bathroom, and once again, an ordinary part of life is expanded into an experience. Instead of a small functional room, the bathroom can become an extension of the bedroom itself. Stone surfaces, large mirrors, glass, carefully positioned lighting, a spacious shower, a bathtub positioned as a visual centerpiece. The design communicates a simple idea. There is no need to rush. This is an important difference between ordinary convenience and extreme luxury. Convenience helps you complete something quickly. Luxury can give you the space and environment to enjoy doing it slowly. A shower is no longer simply preparation for the day. A bath can become part of the day, and the bathroom begins to resemble a private spa rather than a purely functional space. Walk back through the suite, and another pattern becomes clear. Almost everything is designed to reduce the number of reasons you need to leave. You can rest in the bedroom, relax in the living room, spend time in the bathroom, sit beside large windows, move through an interior that may provide many of the comforts normally spread across an entire home. And somewhere beyond the room, a swimming pool, lounge, or other luxury spaces may be waiting. This is how a hotel begins to compete with the feeling of a private residence. Not by convincing you that the room belongs to you permanently, but by making ownership temporarily irrelevant. For a few nights, the environment is simply available. This creates an interesting form of freedom. Owning an extraordinary home gives you control over one location. Staying in extraordinary hotels can provide access to many locations without requiring permanent ownership of each one. Today, the private world outside your window may be a modern skyline. On another journey, it may be water and a horizon. The architecture changes, the view changes, the room changes, but the fundamental promise remains the same. Arrive, close the door, and enter an environment that has already been prepared for you. For the ultra-wealthy, this can become part of a much larger lifestyle. A private jet provides the transition across enormous distances. A helicopter can shorten another part of the journey. A luxury car handles the ground. And then the hotel suite becomes a temporary base at the destination. Each environment hands the traveler to the next one. Private cabin, private vehicle, private suite. The physical spaces change, but the underlying expectation remains consistent: privacy, comfort, and control. This is why the best luxury interiors do not need to overwhelm every surface with decoration. Real luxury can sometimes be visible through restraint. An open room, a carefully designed staircase, a simple wall made extraordinary by material and lighting, a large window with nothing blocking the view, a pool whose surface appears to merge with the horizon. When expensive design becomes confident enough, it does not always need to announce its price. It creates an atmosphere instead. An atmosphere is much harder to copy than an expensive object. You can purchase the same sofa. You can use similar stone. You can install a large bathtub. But recreating the relationship between architecture, proportion, light, privacy, and location is much more difficult. This is why two rooms containing similarly expensive materials can produce completely different experiences. Luxury is not simply the sum of everything inside the room. It is the way those elements interact. But there is another side to this private world that the guest rarely sees. When you enter, the bed is ready, the surfaces are clean, the lighting works, the bathroom is prepared. The pool outside appears perfect. Everything seems as though it has been waiting silently for your arrival. Of course it is not. An enormous amount of work exists behind that illusion. Someone prepared the room, someone maintains the building, someone takes care of the pool. Someone makes sure the environment remains comfortable. Systems operate behind walls. Staff move through spaces the guests may never see. And this leads to one of the most fascinating ideas in luxury hospitality. The better the system works, the less of it the guest notices. The room feels effortless, precisely because the effort has been moved somewhere else. But before we look behind that invisible machine, there is another question we need to answer. Why do these spaces feel luxurious before anyone has provided a single service? Why can a staircase, a living room, a bathroom, or a swimming pool immediately communicate that we have entered a different world? The answer is hidden in the design itself. Because before luxury can be served, luxury has to be designed. Luxury can be expensive, but expensive does not automatically mean luxurious. Fill a room with costly furniture. Cover the surfaces with premium materials and place expensive objects everywhere. And the result can still feel uncomfortable, chaotic, or strangely ordinary. The most impressive luxury spaces achieve something more difficult. Before you know the price of anything inside them, they already feel different. And that feeling is not accidental, it is designed. Start with space. In everyday architecture, space usually has to justify itself. Every room needs a purpose. Every corner should be useful. Furniture is often positioned to maximize function because there is only so much room available. But luxury architecture can approach space differently. Empty space is not necessarily wasted space. It can create distance, calm, and visual balance. A large living room does not have to be filled simply because the floor is available. Furniture can sit away from the walls. Walkways can become wider. Individual objects can have room around them. And suddenly the absence of things becomes part of the luxury. This is one reason a grand staircase can have such a powerful effect. At the most basic level, a staircase performs an incredibly simple function. It moves people between floors. But in a luxury interior, it can become one of the most important visual elements in the entire building. Its shape, proportions, materials, and lighting can transform movement into architecture. Instead of hiding the staircase in a corner, the designer can place it where it becomes impossible to ignore. A practical object becomes sculpture. The same transformation happens throughout luxury design. A wall is no longer simply something dividing one room from another. Its material, texture, and relationship with light can make it part of the visual experience. A ceiling does not simply close a space above. Its height changes the emotional scale of the room. A window is not merely an opening for daylight. It can frame a view so precisely that the landscape begins to resemble a piece of artwork. And a swimming pool does not have to exist as a separate object outside the building. Its position can connect the architecture with the horizon. This is where proportion becomes extremely important. Human beings may not consciously measure every room they enter, but we constantly respond to scale. A low ceiling creates one feeling. A high ceiling creates another. A narrow passage can create compression. A large open living room can create release. Designers can use those transitions deliberately. You move from a smaller space into a larger one, and suddenly the room feels even more dramatic because of what came before it. Luxury is not only about the dimensions themselves, it is about how those dimensions are experienced in sequence. Light plays an equally important role. Imagine the same luxury living room under harsh, flat lighting. The expensive materials remain expensive, but much of the atmosphere disappears. Now change the light. Allow natural daylight to move through large windows. Use softer illumination around the interior. Highlight particular surfaces, furniture, or architectural details. Suddenly depth appears. Stone develops texture. Glass creates reflections. Metal catches small points of light. Shadows give the room structure. The objects have not changed, but the experience has. This is why luxury hotels and residences often look dramatically different from morning to night. During the day, architecture can depend on natural light in the surrounding landscape. At sunset, reflections begin to change. After dark, artificial lighting takes control. The same living room, staircase, bedroom, or pool can produce several completely different moods within a single day. Good design anticipates all of them. Materials add another layer. Stone can communicate permanence and weight. Glass can create openness. Wood can make a large interior feel warmer. Polished surfaces can reflect the surrounding environment, while softer materials can make a bedroom feel quieter and more intimate. The value does not come simply from choosing the most expensive material available. It comes from choosing materials that work together. Too many visual statements competing for attention can make even an expensive interior feel exhausting. The most confident luxury spaces often know when to stop. This is where restraint becomes powerful. One extraordinary staircase can have more impact than 10 decorative objects fighting for attention. One uninterrupted view can be more impressive than a wall filled with expensive decoration. A carefully designed living room can communicate wealth through proportion and space without displaying a recognizable luxury brand anywhere. At the highest level, luxury does not always need to announce itself. Sometimes it whispers through precision. The bedroom demonstrates this particularly well. This is not necessarily where the architecture should be at its most dramatic. A bedroom has another job. It needs to make the body and mind slow down. Lighting becomes softer. The visual environment becomes calmer. Furniture may become simpler. The bed receives more space around it. The view can remain important, but privacy becomes equally valuable. A successful luxury bedroom balances spectacle with retreat. It can be beautiful enough to impress when you first enter, yet calm enough to disappear around you when it is time to sleep. The bathroom takes another approach. Here, designers can transform routine into ritual. Large stone surfaces, glass partitions, mirrors, lighting, and a freestanding bathtub can make the space feel closer to a private spa. Again, the basic function has not changed. Water is still water. A shower is still a shower. But architecture changes the emotional experience surrounding those ordinary actions. This may be one of the clearest demonstrations of what luxury design actually does. It does not always invent new human needs. Instead, it takes existing needs and creates extraordinary environments around them. We already need somewhere to sleep. Luxury creates the bedroom. We already need somewhere to sit. Luxury creates the living room. We already need to move between floors. Luxury turns the staircase into sculpture. We already need to bathe. Luxury creates the spa-like bathroom. We already want to relax. Luxury places the pool against the horizon. The function remains familiar. The experience changes. And nowhere is this philosophy more important than inside a luxury hotel. A private home can be designed around the preferences of one owner. A hotel faces a much more complicated challenge. It must create spaces that feel distinctive and exclusive, while being experienced by many different guests over time. The design needs enough personality to be memorable, but enough balance to remain comfortable for people with very different tastes. The hotel cannot know every guest personally before they arrive, so the architecture has to create the first impression. Before a staff member says a word, the entrance has already communicated something. The staircase has communicated something. The living room has communicated something. The bedroom has communicated something. The pool has communicated something. Design becomes the first layer of service. This is also why transitions matter. The experience does not begin only when the guest reaches the bedroom. It begins when the outside world is left behind. The architecture gradually changes the emotional environment. Large spaces create a sense of arrival. Quieter interiors reduce stimulation. The private room creates separation. The bathroom and bedroom create retreat. The pool reconnects the guest with the outside world, but under completely different conditions. The hotel is guiding the guest through a sequence of experiences without necessarily explaining any of them. And when that sequence works, luxury begins to feel effortless. You do not consciously think about the ceiling height. You simply feel the room is impressive. You do not calculate the distance between the furniture. You feel that the space is generous. You do not analyze the lighting temperature. You feel comfortable. You do not study the proportions of the staircase. You stop and look at it. Great luxury design hides the calculation behind the emotion. But there is one element capable of changing all of these spaces, more dramatically than almost anything else: the relationship between architecture and the world outside. A beautiful room can impress you. A beautiful room opening toward an extraordinary view can become unforgettable. A swimming pool can be luxurious. A swimming pool appearing to meet the horizon can become the image you remember years later. And this is where the walls of the hotel begin to open. Because the next level of luxury is not simply what exists inside the building. It is what happens when the pool, the architecture, the light, and the view become part of the same experience. There is a moment in many extraordinary luxury hotels when the architecture seems to stop and the outside world takes over. You leave the bedroom, move through the living space, pass walls of glass, and suddenly the environment opens toward water, sky, and horizon. This is where one of the most recognizable symbols of luxury appears: the swimming pool. But the pool itself is only part of the story. Water is not rare. Swimming pools exist in homes and hotels all over the world. What transforms a pool into a luxury experience is everything surrounding it: the architecture, the privacy, the space, the light, and perhaps most importantly, the view. Place the same pool inside an ordinary enclosed environment and it performs a simple function. Place it beside an extraordinary residence or luxury hotel. Connect it visually with the landscape and allow the water to appear as though it continues toward the horizon. And suddenly the experience changes completely. The pool is no longer simply somewhere to swim. It becomes part of the architecture. This is why infinity pools have become such a powerful visual symbol of modern luxury. The effect is surprisingly simple. By hiding or visually minimizing the edge of the pool, the water appears to continue beyond its physical boundary. From the right position, the pool can seem to merge with the sea, the sky, or the distant horizon. The actual size of the pool has not become infinite, of course. What has changed is the perception of where the space ends. And perception is one of the most important tools in luxury design. The best luxury environments do not simply give people more things. They change how people experience the things already around them. A window changes the way a room experiences the landscape. High ceilings change the way the body experiences scale. Carefully designed lighting changes the way materials appear. And an infinity pool changes the way the eye understands the boundary between private property and the world beyond it. This relationship between water and architecture becomes particularly powerful during the day. Sunlight moves across the surface. Glass reflects the sky. Interior spaces open toward outdoor terraces. The transition from living room to pool can become almost seamless. Instead of feeling like two separate environments inside and outside, the entire property begins to operate as one continuous space. Sit inside and you can still see the water. Step outside and the architecture remains behind you. The boundary has been softened. For the guest, this can create a very different feeling from simply visiting a conventional hotel swimming pool. A conventional pool is often a destination inside the property. You leave your room and go to the pool. In a carefully designed luxury environment, the pool can feel like an extension of the room, the terrace, or the entire architecture. It is not somewhere you visit. It is part of the world you are already occupying. And then the sun begins to set. This is when the same environment can transform again. The bright reflections of the day gradually disappear. Artificial lighting begins to define the architecture. Light appears beneath the water. Interior spaces glow behind walls of glass. Surfaces that looked one way in daylight take on a completely different character at night. The pool becomes less about swimming and more about atmosphere. This transformation matters because luxury hospitality is not selling a single image. It is selling an experience that has to continue across an entire day. The bedroom must work in the morning and at night. The living room must feel comfortable in bright daylight and after sunset. The bathroom must provide function while still maintaining atmosphere. And the pool must remain visually compelling even when no one is swimming in it. In other words, the environment is always performing. This is where the view becomes extraordinarily important. Imagine two hotel rooms with similar furniture, similar materials, and similar levels of comfort. One looks toward an ordinary wall, the other opens toward a skyline, the sea, or a distant horizon. The physical room may be nearly identical, but the experience is not. The second room has something the first cannot reproduce, simply by purchasing more expensive furniture. Location. And location may be one of the rarest luxury assets of all, because it cannot be manufactured in unlimited quantities. You can build another bed, you can install another bathtub, you can purchase another sofa, you can even construct another swimming pool, but you cannot endlessly reproduce the same view from the same place. This is where architecture becomes a frame. Large windows do not create the landscape, but they decide how the guest experiences it. A terrace does not create the horizon, but it creates a place from which the horizon becomes part of daily life. A pool does not create the sky, but its reflective surface can visually bring the sky into the property. Great luxury design understands when the most valuable element is not something inside the building at all. Sometimes the architecture becomes powerful by getting out of the way. This also explains why space around the pool matters. In a crowded environment, even a beautiful pool can quickly lose its sense of exclusivity. Privacy changes the experience. Fewer people, more distance, more room to sit, walk, or simply look toward the water. The luxury is not necessarily that the pool is physically larger. The luxury may be that the guest does not have to compete for access to it. And this brings us back to a theme that appears again and again at the highest levels of wealth. Luxury often means removing friction. No searching for an available chair, no fighting for a quiet corner, no need to leave the property to find a beautiful place to relax. The environment has already been created around you. The pool is waiting. The view is waiting. The room is waiting. Everything is available without the guest having to organize it. This is what allows a luxury hotel to begin resembling a private resort. The living room provides somewhere to spend time. The bedroom creates retreat. The bathroom becomes a private spa. The staircase and interior design create visual drama. The pool provides relaxation, and the view connects all of it to a location that gives the experience its identity. Taken individually, none of these elements is enough. Together, they create a world. But there is an important difference between a private mansion and a hotel. In a mansion, the environment belongs to the owner. In a hotel, the environment has to create the feeling of personal luxury for guest after guest. The room must look untouched when someone arrives. The bathroom must feel as though nobody has used it before. The pool must appear calm and inviting. The living spaces must remain immaculate. The lighting must work. The surfaces must shine. Every new guest expects to enter the same illusion, that this extraordinary environment has somehow been waiting specifically for them. Maintaining that illusion requires work, a great deal of work. And the better the hotel becomes at hiding that work, the more effortless the experience appears. This is the strange paradox behind luxury hospitality. What the guest experiences as simplicity may be the result of enormous complexity. The perfectly prepared bedroom exists because someone prepared it. The immaculate bathroom exists because someone cleaned and inspected it. The beautiful pool exists because systems and people continuously maintain it. The calm interior exists because countless details are being managed outside the guest's attention. Even the silence may depend on design, technology, and operational decisions the guest will never notice. The visible side of luxury is easy to understand. We see the marble, we see the glass, we see the bedroom, the staircase, the pool, and the extraordinary view. Those images are powerful because they can be captured immediately. But the invisible side may be even more important. A luxury hotel is not simply a beautiful building. It is an operating system designed to keep the beauty functioning. And that system never truly stops. While one guest is relaxing beside the pool, someone is preparing another room. While someone sleeps, systems continue operating throughout the building. Before another traveler arrives, countless details are checked and reset. The goal is simple. When the next door opens, the effort must disappear and only the experience should remain. And this is where we have to go next. Away from the pool, away from the view, away from the spectacular surfaces guests are meant to see. Because behind the polished image of extreme luxury is an invisible machine working constantly to produce one of the most expensive feelings in hospitality: effortlessness. The most impressive luxury experiences often share one strange quality. They make enormous effort look like no effort at all. You enter the hotel and everything appears ready. The living room is immaculate. The bedroom feels untouched. The bathroom shines. The swimming pool looks perfectly calm. The lighting is exactly where it needs to be. Nothing appears rushed. Nothing appears unfinished. Nothing seems complicated. And that is precisely the illusion. Because behind every effortless luxury experience is an enormous amount of preparation. A luxury hotel may look peaceful from the guest perspective, but the environment itself is constantly working. Rooms have to be prepared. Interior spaces have to be maintained. Pools require attention. Lighting, temperature, and countless systems must continue operating. Every visible detail depends on something happening somewhere the guest does not see. The objective is not simply to perform all of that work. The objective is to make the work disappear from the experience. Think about the bedroom. When a guest opens the door, the room should feel as though it has been waiting silently for them. The bed is prepared. The surfaces are clean. Everything is arranged. Lighting creates the right atmosphere. There should be no obvious evidence of the activity required to create that condition. Yet only a short time earlier, the room may have been completely different. The transformation happens outside the guest's attention. The same principle applies to the bathroom. Stone glass mirrors and polished surfaces may create the visual impression of simplicity, but simplicity is difficult to maintain. The more refined the environment becomes, the easier it can be to notice imperfections. A mark on glass. A surface that is not perfectly clean. Something positioned incorrectly. A small detail can suddenly become more visible precisely because everything surrounding it is expected to be exceptional. This creates one of the paradoxes of luxury. The more effortless something looks, the more effort may be required to keep it looking that way. A simple, perfectly organized room can demand more attention than a visually busy environment because there is nowhere for imperfections to hide. A large glass surface looks extraordinary when it is immaculate. A polished floor creates a beautiful reflection when it is maintained. A swimming pool appears peaceful because the systems keeping the water ready remain outside the image. The guest sees the result, not the process. And this extends far beyond individual rooms. Imagine the entire hotel as one large machine. Bedrooms, bathrooms, living areas, staircases, pools, and public spaces all have to continue functioning at the same time. One guest may be waking up while another is arriving. Someone else may be leaving. One room needs to be prepared, while another must remain completely undisturbed. The building has to support many different experiences simultaneously without allowing that complexity to dominate the atmosphere. The result is a strange contradiction. The hotel may contain constant movement behind the scenes while appearing calm in front of the guest. This is one reason architecture matters so much. Luxury design does not only create beautiful spaces, it can help separate the visible world from the operational world. Guests move through one environment while much of the work required to support that environment happens somewhere else. The better that separation functions, the more private and effortless the experience can feel. And that concept is not unique to hotels. Look at almost every symbol of extreme wealth and the same pattern appears. A private jet waiting on a runway looks simple from the passenger's perspective. Walk aboard, take a seat and fly. But the aircraft does not prepare itself. Systems have to be checked. The cabin has to be ready. The journey has to be organized. Consider a yacht resting peacefully on the water. From the deck, the experience may feel almost completely detached from complexity. There is water, sky, beautiful interiors, and privacy. But behind that calm image is an operating vessel that requires continuous attention. Even a luxury residence works the same way. A beautiful living room does not remain perfect forever without maintenance. A swimming pool does not maintain itself. Large interiors, bathrooms, glass surfaces, and outdoor spaces all require care. The difference at the highest levels of wealth is that the person enjoying the environment may rarely need to interact directly with that complexity. Someone else handles it. And perhaps this is one of the least visible forms of luxury, not having to think about everything required to keep your environment functioning. Most people spend part of their lives maintaining the systems around them, cleaning, organizing, repairing, preparing, waiting, solving small problems. None of these tasks is extraordinary by itself, but together they consume time and attention. Luxury services attempt to remove some of that burden. The guest enters after the preparation has happened and leaves before the environment has to be reset again. For a few hours or a few days, the machinery of everyday life moves into the background. This is where service becomes as important as architecture. A spectacular bedroom can create the first impression. A beautiful bathroom can create another. A swimming pool and an extraordinary view can produce unforgettable images. But physical design alone cannot maintain the experience. The building needs an operating system around it. And the best service often works in exactly the same way as the best design. It anticipates rather than reacts. If the guest constantly has to identify problems, ask for solutions, and wait for them to be fixed, the illusion of effortlessness begins to collapse. The higher the expectation, the more valuable anticipation becomes. This is why true luxury can sometimes be defined by absence. The absence of waiting, the absence of unnecessary noise, the absence of visible disorder, the absence of problems reaching the guest, the absence of having to think about small logistical details. These things are difficult to photograph, yet they can define the difference between a beautiful hotel and an extraordinary experience. And time sits at the center of all of them. Every inconvenience consumes time. Waiting consumes time. Solving problems consumes time. Organizing details consumes time. Even deciding between too many unnecessary options consumes attention. When a luxury environment removes those frictions, what it is indirectly returning to the guest is time. This is the same reason private aviation can become attractive to people whose schedules are extremely valuable. The luxury is not simply the seat or the cabin. It is the ability to reduce certain parts of the conventional travel process. A helicopter can serve the same purpose across shorter distances. A luxury car waiting when it is needed can remove another period of uncertainty. Different machines, different environments, but the underlying objective can be remarkably similar: make the transition easier. And a luxury hotel continues that philosophy after the journey ends. The aircraft handles the distance. The vehicle handles the road. The hotel handles the destination. The guest arrives and enters an environment where much of the work has already been completed. The bedroom is ready. The bathroom is ready. The living space is ready. The pool is ready. The entire building is essentially saying the same thing. You do not need to prepare this world. You only need to enter it. That may explain why some of the most valuable luxury experiences are not necessarily the most visually extravagant. Once someone has seen enough marble, glass, large bedrooms, and beautiful pools, visual spectacle alone becomes less surprising. What becomes harder to reproduce is consistency. Can the environment feel exceptional every time? Can it remain quiet when the building is busy? Can everything work without drawing attention to itself? Can the guest move from the bedroom to the living room, from the interior to the pool, and through the rest of the property without constantly encountering friction? Luxury becomes less about one spectacular object and more about hundreds of small details refusing to go wrong. But this raises the biggest question of the entire video. If the bed still performs the same basic function as any other bed, if the bathroom still serves the same fundamental needs, and if the swimming pool is still ultimately water inside a structure, why can the experience command such extraordinary value? Clearly, the answer cannot be found in the objects alone. The guest is paying for the room, but also for space. Paying for the bathroom, but also for privacy. Paying for the pool, but also for access. Paying for the hotel, but also for the enormous invisible system that keeps inconvenience away. And perhaps, above everything else, paying for the temporary ability to stop managing the environment and simply experience it. So when the door closes behind the guest for the final time, what exactly have they purchased? A few nights inside an expensive building? Or something far more difficult to measure? That is the question waiting for us in the final chapter. What are you really paying for? After walking through extraordinary living rooms, private bedrooms, spa-like bathrooms, dramatic staircases, swimming pools, and carefully designed interiors, we arrive at the final question. What are you really paying for when you stay inside a world like this? At first, the answer seems obvious. You are paying for a hotel room, a larger room, a better bed, more beautiful furniture, expensive materials, a spectacular bathroom, a swimming pool, perhaps an extraordinary view. But if luxury were simply the sum of expensive objects, creating the world's most exclusive hotel would be surprisingly easy. Buy the most expensive furniture, use the most expensive stone, install the largest bathtub, build a bigger pool, add more glass, make every room larger, increase the price, and somehow luxury should automatically appear. But it does not work that way. Because the difference between something expensive and something truly luxurious is not always found in what has been added. Sometimes it is found in what has been removed. Noise has been removed. Crowds have been reduced. Waiting has been minimized. Unnecessary decisions have disappeared. Maintenance happens somewhere else. Problems are solved before they become part of the guest's experience. And suddenly, what looks like a beautiful hotel room becomes something much more valuable, an environment with less friction. Consider the bedroom again. The bed itself may be extraordinary, but the real experience includes everything around it. The quiet, the lighting, the temperature, the space, the privacy, the ability to close the door and temporarily disconnect from everything outside. None of those things looks particularly dramatic on its own. Yet together, they can transform an ordinary human activity sleeping into something that feels completely different. The same is true of the bathroom. Stone and glass can create the visual language of luxury, but the deeper value may be having enough space and privacy that there is no reason to rush. A bath becomes more than a functional activity. A shower becomes part of a slower experience. Time itself begins to feel different because the environment is no longer pushing you toward the next task. Then there is the living room. Why does a luxury suite need a large living area when the guest could simply sit on the bed? Because luxury often begins where necessity ends. You do not need a separate living room to survive a night in a hotel. You do not need an enormous staircase. You do not need a private lounge. You do not need a pool overlooking the horizon. These spaces exist because the objective is no longer simply to satisfy basic needs. The objective is to create choice. You can sit here or there, stay inside or go outside, rest in the bedroom or spend time in the living area, swim or simply sit beside the water, watch the view from inside or step onto the terrace. More space creates more possibilities, and more possibilities create a greater sense of control. This is one of the hidden currencies of luxury: choice. For most people traveling, many decisions are determined by circumstances. The flight leaves at a particular time. The seat is assigned. Transportation arrives according to a schedule. The hotel room has a particular size. The pool may be crowded. The environment establishes the limits, and the traveler adapts. Extreme wealth can reverse part of that relationship. The environment increasingly adapts to the traveler. A private jet can offer greater flexibility over departure. A helicopter can reduce certain ground journeys. A luxury vehicle can be waiting when required. A hotel suite provides multiple private spaces at the destination. The swimming pool, bathroom, bedroom, and living room are already prepared. The traveler moves through a chain of environments designed to reduce interruption. And that may be why the most powerful luxury is often invisible. A photograph can show a private jet, but it cannot easily show the time potentially saved around the journey. A camera can show an immaculate hotel room, but it cannot show every problem that was prevented before the guest arrived. A video can show a beautiful swimming pool, but it cannot capture the value of having enough privacy to enjoy it without competing with a crowd. We can film the object. It is much harder to film the absence of inconvenience. Yet that absence may be exactly what the guest values most. This creates an interesting relationship between money and time. Money can purchase larger spaces, better materials, more sophisticated transportation, more services. But once a person's material needs have been exceeded many times over, additional spending can begin targeting something else: time and attention. Someone else prepares the room. Someone else maintains the pool. Someone else organizes the environment. Someone else handles countless small tasks. The guest does not receive more than 24 hours in the day. No amount of wealth can change that. But money can change how many of those hours are consumed by inconvenience. And perhaps this is the point where luxury stops being about possessions and starts becoming about control. Control over where you stay. Control over how private the environment feels. Control over when you rest. Control over how you travel. Control over how much of your attention is spent dealing with ordinary friction. Not absolute control, no amount of money can provide that, but more choices than most people normally have. This also explains why the luxury hotel occupies such an interesting position in the world of extreme wealth. A mansion offers ownership. A yacht offers a private environment that can move across the water. A private jet provides another form of mobility, but the hotel offers something different: temporary access to an entire luxury environment without requiring permanent ownership of it. You arrive. The building is ready. The bedroom is ready. The bathroom is ready. The living spaces are ready. The pool is ready. The systems behind the walls are already operating. And when you leave, the responsibility remains behind. You take the experience with you, but not the maintenance. For someone who can afford to own almost anything, that may create an unexpected kind of freedom. Not everything needs to be owned. Sometimes access is enough. And this idea extends far beyond hotels. A supercar creates one kind of experience. A private jet creates another. A yacht creates another. A beautiful residence creates another. Watches, gold and diamonds can become symbols of craftsmanship, scarcity, and personal taste. But eventually, the accumulation of objects reaches a strange limit. There are only so many cars a person can drive. Only so many rooms they can occupy. Only so many watches they can wear. At that point, the question becomes less about how much you own and more about what those things allow you to experience. That may be the most important distinction in the entire luxury world. The visible object attracts our attention, but the invisible benefit explains why it matters. We see the private jet. The owner may see flexibility. We see the supercar. The driver may see emotion. We see the yacht. The owner may see privacy and mobility. We see the hotel suite. The guest may see silence, space, and the freedom to temporarily stop thinking about everything required to maintain the environment. The object and the experience are connected, but they are not the same thing. And there is one final paradox. The more money someone has, the more they can spend trying to remove inconvenience from life. But life itself can never become completely frictionless. The most extraordinary bedroom cannot guarantee perfect sleep. The most beautiful bathroom cannot guarantee health. The most spectacular swimming pool cannot guarantee happiness. A private jet cannot stop time. A luxury hotel cannot prevent tomorrow from arriving. Money can redesign the environment around a person, sometimes in extraordinary ways, but it cannot completely redesign the human condition inside that environment. Perhaps that is why luxury remains so fascinating. From the outside, we see marble, Glass, enormous rooms, swimming pools, private aircraft, and spectacular interiors. They look like evidence of a world without limits. But look more closely, and the real story is more subtle. The limits have not disappeared. Wealth has simply created more ways to manage them. More privacy against crowds, more space against confinement, more mobility against distance, more service against inconvenience, more choice against restriction, and sometimes more usable time against the endless demands of everyday life. So what are you really paying for when you enter one of the world's most extraordinary luxury environments? Yes, you are paying for the bedroom, the bathroom, the living room, the architecture, the pool, the view, the materials, and the service. But underneath all of those things, you may be paying for something far less visible. The temporary ability to live inside a world where many of life's small complications have already been handled for you. A world where the room is ready before you arrive, where the water is waiting, where the lights are already on, where the environment asks almost nothing from you except to experience it. And when the final night ends, the door closes, the hotel disappears behind you, and the journey begins again. Perhaps the greatest luxury was never the marble, the glass, or the size of the suite. Perhaps it was something much simpler. For a brief period of time, almost everything was taken care of.